Hello everyone and welcome to the Movie Doctor. Welcome to episode 2 of Movie Autopsy, the show where we go deep into it and analyse a movie like no one else has done before. And on this episode, we have the big movie to digest. Disney's Mulan released on Disney Plus amid a cloud of controversy. There have even been calls to boycott the film, so just what the hell is going on? The 1998 original is still a beloved film enjoyed by all generations, but how does a live-action remake compare? Did the movie meet expectations, or were we left disappointed? Stick around and you'll find out. This is Movie Autopsy, with me, the Movie Doctor.
Hello everyone, welcome to the Movie Doctor and episode 2 of Movie Autopsy with me, the Movie Doctor, the show where we go deep and analyse and dissect a film like no man or woman has done before. And on this episode, we are looking into a very interesting film. Now, as you can see from the title, it is, of course, Disney's Mulan. Disney's Mulan is a cinematic masterpiece. It's entertaining, it's hilarious, it's unique in its use of artistic angles and imagery, and it's strong in its message of female empowerment, and it's positive in its representation of Asian characters. But that's enough about the 1998 original film. We are here, of course, to talk about the live-action remake which released on Disney Plus not so long ago. Now, this film has a pretty unenviable task of living up to the very high standards that was set by the beloved original film. But did it live up to the hype? Was all the controversy around the film worth it? There's only one place to find out, and you're right here. So sit back, because we are going to hash it out. And while you're at it, just give us a little like and a share and subscribe. You know the rest. Any self-respecting doctor knows the value of the people around him. And for such a huge task, I could not possibly do this alone. So today we have another very, very special guest. It is, of course, the wonderful Rachel Szaruta. Hello.
Hello.
Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
No problem. You're my second guest. So thank you. Now,
didn't want to be first anyway.
Now, if you guys haven't watched episode 1 of this show, firstly, what the hell is wrong with you? Go and watch it. I mean, pause this, go and watch it, and then come back. But if you haven't watched it, let me very quickly explain how this works. So we're going to dissect the film into 5 different categories. That's story, performance, direction and cinematography, music, and impact. And for each category, we're going to give the film a rating out of 10. And then, of course, we're going to give it an overall rating out of 10. So a little bit of background before we get into it. Mulan was meant to be released in March 2020, but I don't know if you heard, there's been a thing called COVID going around. So yeah, it's unfortunately pushed back a lot of films. Mulan was one to suffer. And in fact, it didn't even get a theatrical release. It ended up being put on Disney Plus. It is also the most expensive film ever to have a female director. It's the first Disney film to have an entirely Asian and Asian American cast. And it's the first of Disney's live action remakes that have got a PG-13 rating in the United States. So it's fair to say that the pressure is very much on. So we'll start with story. So Rachel, and for those who are new, I always start with a very quick synopsis before we get into things. So Liu Yifei, apologies for pronunciation there, I've done my best. She of course plays Mulan, who are at first happy and do not seem bothered by her unladylike behavior. She likes to play around with swords and climb onto roofs, and it's fine, but as she gets older, the plan eventually is for her to get married off. And her father is played by veteran Chinese American actor Tzi Ma, who plays Zhao. He is himself a very, very gentle old soldier, and he's still nursing clearly a very painful leg injury that he incurred during battle. But out in the wider world, storm clouds are gathering because rebellious warrior Bori Khan, played by Jason Scott Lee, is leading an attack on the Emperor, who is played by the legend himself, Jet Li, in revenge for the Emperor killing his father. And his small outlaw band gets some supernatural help in the form of Zhang Lang, who is played by Gong Li, who is a woman with witch-like magical powers. So all families need to provide one man to help this cause. But Zhao unfortunately has no sons. He only has 2 daughters. So he bravely offers himself which the recruiting officer is very, concerned by, because clearly he's a lot older and he clearly is nursing this very painful leg injury. Mulan steals his uniform, sword, and his horse and rides off to volunteer in his stead, disguised as a boy. But Mulan astonishes Commander Tung, who is played by Donnie Yen, with her amazing warrior skills and training. And she also has a quite ambiguous meet-cute type bromance/romance rivalry with fellow soldier Hong Kui, who is played by Yosun An. How Mulan and co tackle the ominous odds that face them form the rest of the film. Now, it's worth mentioning at this point to the fans of the original 1998 film, there are no songs, there are no jokes, and there is a massive dragon-shaped hole because there is no MUSHU. So it gets 0 out of 10 for everything. No, I'm only joking. We watched this film together. I say together, we watched it.
We did.
Disney Plus is a very, very good watch party service, which is actually great for this kind of thing, which we utilized yesterday. Tell me your thoughts, please.
Well, I thought it was a very enjoyable, easy watch, which, there's nothing wrong with that. But like you said, it's a lot of money gone into a film. I did feel like some of the memorable and impactful moments from the original felt a little less powerful, almost like when you're plagiarizing an essay, you reword it to sound different, but then it has less impact. Not that I know anything about that. For example, when she returns home from the war, her father obviously tosses us in the 98 version, he tosses aside all those honorable gifts from the emperor to hug her and tell her she is his greatest gift and honor. And I think that's just a beautiful moment. And again, it was kind of taken away from in the new one. I think it was more impactful as well in the older one, because I think the physical affection side of things, I don't think would have been very commonplace, especially for a father to hug his daughter like that. I don't think it would have been sort of proper etiquette, if you will. So for me, that was like moments like that didn't hit as hard. The avalanche scene, I didn't like the way this one played out as much. They didn't have, for one, most importantly, they did not have Chin-Po picking everyone up by being in a complete Zen mode. But also the soldiers didn't see Mulan risking her life to save them. And I think that kind of made the transition of the other soldiers then and the commanders accepting her seem a bit tenuous. It was a bit like, oh, okay. I did like the involvement of the Chi and how Commander Tung recognized her as the warrior because of it. So I'd like that little extra bit in there. So where the hell is Mushu? And also the eccentric but wise grandmother. Where's the grandmother?
The lack of Mushu was one of the first things I wrote in my notes.
It's in capitals of mine.
It's in capitals of mine as well, along with a few expletives, which I'm not going to use now. But I really feel like that it struggled to find an identity. It didn't know what it wanted to be. Yeah. It was like, was it a period piece, a war drama, or a kind of teenage kind of coming of age thing? Yeah. It's all kind of somewhere in the middle. Obviously, it's far more kind of sinister, and not sinister, it's like I said, serious and more it's more mature, and it felt a little rushed as well. They really didn't do a great job in terms of structuring this. Checked an hour in and it felt like a lot had happened. A lot had happened to get to that point. I felt like, whoa, how did we even get here?
So it's like some iconic moments that seemed like milestones in the plot in the animated one were just sort of brushed over. Like they did it, but like I said, they've taken the original ideas and then just kind of changed them so they're not exactly the same, but because in changing them, they've taken away the strength from its original form.
It wants to be the same, but it also wants to be different, and you can't be both. But they're trying to be both, and and they struggle to find identity, because I really wasn't sure what they wanted to do. And I think and honestly, this felt like the things that were removed are the things that stood out. That's really all it is. Like if you were to describe this to somebody else, what's it like? Well, it's just the same, but it's just different, and it's different because it doesn't have these things. Not rather than it's different because it has these things. That makes sense. If you were to give it out of a rating out of 10, what would you give it? I have given one.
I've given it a 7.5.
Okay,
I've given it a 7.5, which I think is a very distinct average.
You've been more generous than me. I gave it a 6. So can we settle on 7?
I was torn between sort of absolutely. I would say that there were some like certain parts in it that I know we've been quite savage just now with how we've sort of broken it down. But I think there were some things to recognise that actually the original didn't have. So obviously the storyline in this one followed the original plot of the original Mulan, but it's also obviously the folklore of Mulan.
Yeah.
And I mean, there were certain characters missing. You've got like Li Shang, which I know had some massive controversy when it was announced, because people saw him as like a bisexual icon, because it was implied he was attracted to Ping. They kind of included that again with Hong Hui, and I quite like the camaraderie growing between them as they train together. And they didn't dress as ugly concubines. Absolutely, what are they thinking? And when I sort of looked up a bit of the history behind the folklore behind Mulan, is I then saw actually a reference in this movie, the moment in the opening scenes when she's older, she's riding her horse and there's the two hares running. And then she goes back to her parents and she mentions that she can't tell which the male, which the female, which is actually relates back to the original folklore. And at the end of it, when they ask like why, I think why she decided to go into the army, etc. But there's a quote and it literally says, the male hare has heavy front paws, the female hare tends to squint, but when they are running side by side close to the ground, who can tell me which is male or female? Knowledge is power. And I really actually liked that reference back to the original folklore that they put in.
Okay, that's good. Yeah,
in there. So
that's a plus point. It's like they're driving the train, but the tracks are still being made.
Yeah,
that's how it feels.
Yeah,
like
I agree.
I think they're trying, but they've got to keep going, but they haven't quite figured out where they're going, kind of thing.
As a whole, I kind of felt the performances were rather flat. Like no one really stood out for me. There were no real defining character traits. Like if you compare it to, say, Avengers, forgetting these solo films, if you've never even watched the solo films, you watch the first Avengers movie, you know what the characters are, you know exactly how they act, how they do things. I mean, except for just Scarlett Johansson, but that's for another episode. My favorite character was probably Witch Zhang Yang. Again, like I don't think her character really had any real importance to the plot. Like she wasn't necessary to be there, but other than to really bulk the story up with something. But she was pretty cool, and she was played by Gong Li, and she plays these slightly unhinged characters like really well. So she played Hatsumomo in Memoirs of a Geisha, and she's incredible as this spiteful like rival antagonist. So I just loved her. I think the weakest sort of character toss up for me was probably between the father and the mother. Like I just didn't really feel like they demonstrated the weight and the importance of tradition and how Mulan is bringing shame to the family with her actions. Like it felt their contribution to the plot was written too thin. Like again, like you said, it was a bit rushed. So a little bit disappointed with Ling Yao and Chimpo, because they were great characters in the original, and I just don't think they were given enough screen time to show the bond between them and Mulan compared to the original. And I found like the matchmaker wasn't as terrifying as the original. I mean, in the original she was voiced by the fantastic Miriam Margolyes, but it just kind of felt like in this version the character was very generic, stiff-lipped, snobby old woman. And I also felt that Jason Scott Lee's portrayal of Bori Khan felt generic. He wasn't intimidating enough, or he didn't hold enough presence in his scenes, in my opinion. Like compared to Shan Yu, who's the bad guy, you know, he is terrifying. Like you imagine seeing him, and you'd be like, oh my god, this man could crush my skull with his fist. You could have had these really great character moments, and they just didn't include them.
Liu Yifei, plays Mulan, was just kind of lukewarm, and like you said, there was nothing overly memorable. There was no spark, there was no any standouts really. Very wooden and flat, and just kind of very you know, there's a lot of things, there was nobody stood out as, oh, he was great. Like there's not even, normally when you have something that's like, not great, let's say, there's always someone, one or two, who come up with some glory which you think might save it, or I was really looking for, or those bits were really like a highlight to me. But they didn't have any of that. Kind of real low point was the the bit where they're eating and discussing like their ideal woman.
Yep.
I really hated that. It was very cringy. It was backward. Nobody came out of it looking good. It was very weak, and it just felt very.
I get, because obviously then that is the kind of thing they expect in a female. Like she is supposed to be for breeding and looking after the home and everything else.
The execution was pretty dire. It was like kind of, I don't even know, like kind of like 1950s America kind of chat, and it was very weak, and I think it really took away from the authenticity and the kind of culture that we were in.
Possibly the film relied on too much, is how well everyone knows the original, therefore they can be lazy with certain things in this one.
It's lazy, really. It came across as lazy, you know, and Gong Li's witch, the character, got more and more diluted as things went along. That aura disappeared very quickly, and the way there was a kind of turnaround at the end, that felt very lazy as well. So with that in mind, out of 10,
I was quite generous before in terms, like when I first looked at this, I did give him like a 7.5, but I was like, actually, because I feel like a 7.5 is a very distinct average, like not bad but not good. But I've actually changed my mind now and given it a 6, because like you said, that as we've just sort of discussed, it's just, like you said, very wooden and not very much character distinction. Like I even felt like Jet Li was a little bit watered down. They just sort of were relying on the fact that it's Jet Li rather than power, he can actually act.
We'll go with 6 performance. I think that's fair. I think anything higher seems unjust. You know, even if we wanted to be generous,
he's very generous.
Even if we wanted to be generous, it felt like we can't go higher than a 6. I feel like we are being generous by giving it a 6.
So in terms of Niki Caro and her directing, to be honest, I actually don't have a lot to say, which actually probably does say a lot, because it's sort of like, well, what, I've got nothing to go, oh my god, this was amazing, this was amazing. But I was really happy that it was a female director, but to be honest, I'd actually wish that they'd just gone for a Chinese director, because I feel like they potentially may have understood everything a little bit better. And I also felt that there were some really outdated moments. So like we said before about Gong Li's character sort of being watered down throughout the film, and then having the moment at the end where she sort of changes her mind and helps Mulan. But another one for me, which was when Mulan, after having her little fight with Gong Li and with where all the sulfur pools and the geysers are, she chooses to fight as a woman, which is an awesome moment. But she starts like taking off her armor and everything, which kind of makes no sense, because you're going into a battle, you should probably keep that on. But then she takes out her hair. Oh, and lo and behold, her hair is curled and styled perfectly, and suddenly her makeup looks more feminine, and she's barely got a mark on her. I just thought they could have tried something more original with that. Like, it kind of took away from the moment. I also found the voiceover narration really annoying, and again, unnecessary and outdated. It's been done before. It didn't need to be done. Agree. You know the story. If you're watching it, you can see what's going on. Mulan's home, it felt like it looked like a set. You know, I would have liked to have seen some actual Chinese architecture. Like in the original movie, they've got this lovely it's not a farm, but the lovely house that they have with the gardens and everything. The cinematography itself felt a bit mixed in its vision. So compared to some other works by Chinese director Zhang Yimou, who I'm a big fan of, they have very distinct colours. Like in Hero, there's very distinct colours, and the atmosphere feels consistent.
I'm starting with the positive bits, just so it doesn't seem like we're doing a whole lot of negatives. Because it's
we're
important
just sort of
to look
like absolutely ripping into the movie.
I'm getting all the good bits straight away. The first thing I wrote down was like, visually stunning, and this would have looked immense in the cinema. I thought the fights and the actions were fantastic. Undoubted highlight. You know, even if there were ludicrous bits in there, it was fine, because it was like, oh, that was pretty cool. And it's always like consistently done in interesting places. So you got like, you know, deserts and mountainous deserts and avalanche and things like that. So it's nice for that, you know, the visual element for that as well. And like you said, the spilling of the color across the thing was different. You know, and another diversion from the original. Good. Now, onto the negatives.
Just remove negative thoughts and I will have positive thoughts.
And this one was a big thing. This is a big thing for me. And I think it's one of the many reasons why this has drawn a lot of controversy anyway. It's the portrayal of, you know, Chinese culture. And I like from you, I'm not an expert. I don't know a lot about it. I can only speak as someone who is from Asia, but I don't know enough about this particular part of the world to talk too much about it. But what I think I can talk about is that I wasn't too happy about this, because I felt like it was a really westernized version of Chinese culture, you know, simplifying it and making it relatable for the wrong demographic. There was a little bit of misdirection there, which is quite cheeky in the sense that the cast was predominantly Asian, which is fantastic. That is really good because it doesn't happen a lot, and that's a really important milestone. But the crew clearly isn't, and more probably, not Chinese or Asian. And Niki Caro, has done some great things, and it's great that we've got her in the spot. And I think that it's a bit of a habit. Well, no, we've got a female person in charge. We've got a female director in charge, but she's from New Zealand, so how much could she have really brought to and tell a story that is clearly set in China? Now, cultural appropriation is a trigger phrase these days, but it was clear on a huge scale, and it was hard not to notice that while watching this. I think with the push that is behind this, be it from a marketing perspective or budget perspective, with all of that considered, it was a huge letdown. A real negative part. Real negative part. They really missed a huge trick, and it's not surprising that this got a lot of flack and a lot of criticism. I think it's a little bit just and warranted.
Another thing that would be interesting to look at, actually, but I didn't, is actually the geographical accuracy that they portrayed in the film as well. Because obviously you got the painted desert in one bit. You didn't see the Great Wall of China, which is fair enough. But it'd be actually quite interesting to see how accurate it all is in terms of the geographical sense of where everything is.
Well, if you do know, comment below. On that note, I'm interested to see what you give her as a rating out of 10.
After our discussion, I want to say 5.
Yeah, that's bang on what I got as well, 5.
I
mean, we mentioned that obviously there were some good elements like the visual bits, which obviously there's clearly a lot of effort into, but there's far too much negative elements for us to ignore as well to give this any higher than a 5. Ultimately, they took MUSHU away, but they also took a lot of personality away as well.
Okay, so I actually had a bit of an issue with the music. So the composer is Harry Gregson Williams, who is a fantastic composer. He's done The Chronicles of Narnia, he's done Kingdom of Heaven, but he also did The Prince of Persia with Jake Gyllenhaal. And there are elements in the Mulan soundtrack that are identical to Prince of Persia. It really annoyed me because I just felt like it lacked originality. Because like, well,
it definitely did.
I was just thinking about it, and I was just thinking, right, okay, so this is exactly the same as Prince of Persia. The guy who's done the music for Prince of Persia, he's just not done anything new. And I also wished that they had chosen an Asian composer. Though I did like the nod to the original soundtrack with the orchestral sort of choral version of Reflections playing during quite epic, like emotional moments when like Mulan is riding into battle or being true to herself. I did like, again, like the nod to the original. I did like that.
If you go to GarageBand or iMovie on your MacBook, I'm not 100% what the Windows equivalent is, but I know can only speak as a Mac user. If you go on these apps, they have like generic music in there, right? That you can use as like, for whatever. And they have like a section like world, right? For music. And when you go to like the Oriental section, they won't say Oriental or Chinese or Asian. They'll make it in terms of like the name of the instrument. It's just a very generic kind of, stereotypical music from that part of the world. And if they could have just used that and just put it in the background, and it wouldn't have been a surprise. It was nice, if you can say that. But like you said, for the problems that it causes and the issues that it has, it's nothing memorable. And like I said, they shot themselves really on the foot really early on with the decision to not have any actual songs. Because even the other live action movies, they do have songs.
And this one just very much falls flat in comparison. And also, in terms of music, nothing is ever going to be "I'll make a man out of you." So
I mean, that's my final point on this section is like, especially when the 1980 original was so good in this area, another huge letdown. They clearly were very bold and brave in the beginning to choose not to have songs. But if you're not going to have those things, which are a massive it's a massive kind of hole that you've left, You've got to fill it with something. Series of strange and baffling decisions. But anyway, out of 10.
5 again.
well, you've been more generous than I have. I went with 3.
Savage.
In the interest of impartiality and fairness, we'll go with a 4. 4 out of 10 is not good in any scoring system. So yeah.
That is,
okay.
I mean, unless it's like first year of uni where it's only have to get 40%. But even then, come on.
But you should be aiming higher, like.
Yeah, you should be aiming for more than just skimming through. Well, it didn't live up to the hype. Obviously, it was supposed to be another big thing. Oh, look, it's a great movie that we're going to turn into a live action movie. That should be a really exciting and amazing thing to see some of your favorite animated characters coming to life. It should be amazing. Like the hype you get when you go to Disneyland and you see the actors in their costumes. It just didn't live up to the hype. But my expectations of it being a lot of money thrown at a production with generic, slightly basic end product definitely lived up to the expectations. Yeah. I mean, the original was less than 90 minutes long, I believe, and it got the message across, and it had time for musical numbers.
Now, I do at this stage want to kind of talk about how this has become a lightning rod for controversy. Now, not just for the issues that we've talked about, but during the promotional tour or whatever of this film, lead actor Liu Yifei declared her support for the Hong Kong police, and that's even after allegations of brutality against protesters. This obviously sparked the hashtag boycott Mulan movement, which was seen in Hong Kong, but also in Thailand and Taiwan. In the final credits, Disney actually offers special thanks to 8 government entities in Xinjiang, and it's been documented that there are concentration camps in this area, and there's been international condemnation over the treatment of Muslim minorities in this area. Associating yourself with this kind of thing is very dangerous, and it's not a surprise that it led to so much outrage. We're here to just talk about films and our passion for it, and the chat everyone's discussing it, so we don't want to get too much on that. But I think
we're gonna get political.
If we're talking about the impact, I think we can't, especially with Mulan, we can't not discuss that. They have no feet left. They've shot it so many times. They tried to deviate from the original, but in doing so, they tripped themselves over too many times trying to be something different.
I think that's also an issue with a lot of movies in general these days. They try so hard to be this epic, awesome movie that they miss the opportunity to have genuinely talented actors portraying these complex characters with not necessarily a complex story, but an engaging story, and instead they'll just get the popular famous actors that are going to bring in audiences even if they're not right for the role, and they'll just chuck in a load of fight scenes and action scenes to keep you engaged rather than it actually having any depth to it. And especially in this kind of story where it is about, in essence, female empowerment.
Okay, impact out of 10.
Do you know what? My original score is actually really, really generous, but actually now I want to give it a 4. Which
is what I've got. So
yeah,
I think that's fair. I mean, I don't think they deserve. Honestly, they don't deserve to. I mean, from a place of positivity and trying to see the right side of things, I can't. I just can't. It's not fair. It's not right. They haven't done enough to justify it. We got to also give this an overall rating as well.
I'd probably say, considering now we've gone through it and I've heard what you had to say, I'd probably give it more of a 6.
Yeah, which is why
because
I gave it from the offset.
How much disappointment there is in there. I mean, that's not to say there aren't good bits in it, but the negative don't outweigh the positive. The negative outweighs the positive. So.
And that's what they are. They're just bits.
Yeah.
There's not like anything strong enough that's good to, like, the things that are good are like secondary, if you like, or they're like there's not, like you said, they're not good enough to outweigh any of the negatives in this.
And analysing it like we have, you really do realise what's missing from it. So it's not necessarily just the fact that they didn't do this right, they didn't do this right. It's just the stuff that is missing, elements that are missing from it, just become like glaringly obvious. And that is a shame.
There's a lot to unpack in this, so thank you for sort of sticking around and listening. But let us know what you're saying. If there's anyone who can justify a higher score than that, please let us know. I'd love to hear if you can. If it should be lower, I would agree with you, I reckon, probably. But yeah, listen, comment section, let us know what you think, guys. Otherwise, give us a like. Please give us a share. Please do subscribe as well. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you very much, Rachel, for being here, for unpacking this.
Thank you for having me.
No problem. So yeah, that was Mulan. It did not live up to expectations. But
that was not Mulan.
That was such is life. But we hope that this video did. So until next time, this has been Movie Autopsy. I've been the Movie Doctor, and I will see you next time.